Hi everyone, welcome back to Pine Hollow Auto Diagnostics. Today we have the legendary Toyota Sienna 2000 V6. 555,000 miles on this thing. And customer complaint is it's vibrating on the highway. Drives great, it just said it's getting annoying. Let's take a quick peek at the odometer. Now he's almost at 556. Okay. So I diagnosed this car, and the problem was worn CV axles. I think the inner joints, they just developed some play, and the symptoms are when you're under load accelerating at about 20 to 30 miles per hour, the car kind of shimmies. If you let off the gas, no shimmy. Then, as you get to highway speeds over 60 miles per hour, it just feels like a wheel's out of bounds, but you got brand new tires, everything's balanced, everything's good. And it gets worse as you push the gas, but it's still there as you're coasting. I mean, at like 70 miles per hour, the customer said he was like riding a jackhammer. Kind of annoying. So, CV axles at over 500,000 miles, that's impressive. But they're worn out. The CV boots are all torn up, so we're going to replace them. Unfortunately, OEM parts are very scarce for a 23-year-old van, so you have to go Chinesium aftermarket new axles. I did the left one already. Piece of cake. You can even pull on it, it'll pop right out of the transmission, put a new one in, away you go. The right one ran into a roadblock. Let me show you guys. Apparently this is a common problem on these V6 Toyotas. Alright, so passenger side axle. As you can see, we have an oily, grimy mess over here. The CV boot's probably been torn for about 200,000 miles. It still has some grease left in it, but it's shot. Also has oil leaks, so kind of a dirty area. Now, what's the issue here? I'll show you on the new axle what the issue is. So you can see it's a long axle. This is the transmission side. This is obviously the wheel side. And right here, we have this intermediate bearings. This is all one shaft. You can't just replace this part. I mean, you could, but you need to replace the cup for these symptoms. Bearing is pressed onto the shaft. Now, what is this bearing held in? Well, it's held in this piece, which is an engine mount and CV axle bearing carrier, all in one. And guess what happens, especially in the Northeast and the Salt Belt? Yep, water gets in here, and the steel bearing rusts to the cast iron engine mount. So, if you go on YouTube, go on Google, there are several methods that people use to extract these axles. Mostly destructive methods. So, one method is to just cut part of this axle out, pull this piece out, and then hammer. You have enough room here, I guess, to hammer this piece out, and the bearing will pop out. So if it sits like this, it'll come out this way towards the wheel. You can see there's a little hole here that is for a screw, and a little rubber disc that's supposed to hold the bearing in, I guess when it's non-rusted, at the factory. It's supposed to be a light press fit with this retaining bolt. However, when it rusts, then you take the retaining bolt out and try to get the axle out, and there's no way it's going to come out. So method one is cut the axle with a heavy-duty Sawzall and hammer it out that way, if you want to save the engine mount. However, in this case, the engine mount, you can see, is pretty much destroyed. It's bottomed out, the rubber's torn, so like, hey, you might as well also replace the engine mount. So, I don't want to cut the axle, I want to cut the engine mount. And to relieve this diameter, my idea was to just use an angle grinder and cut the thin part right here, cut it right through, and then it should crack, spread open just a little bit, and then we'll be able to get this bearing out. Let's see if that is a viable solution or option here. I think another video, a guy forces a longer bolt in here and it like cracks the bearing race, and then you can hit it out. I don't like that. It's too destructive, too messy, and this old axle, even though it's worn out, it's still usable. But if you do that, it's junk. So let's see if we can cut this engine mount. So you're going to need an angle grinder. This is just Harbor Freight, but the disc is a diamond tip indestructible beast. I don't know where I got this, like Bad Dog Tools or something. If I find this one, I'll put it in the description, but it's diamond tip steel disc, will cut through anything. And it had no problems cutting straight through the cast iron engine mount. It took about a minute. Nice clean cut. Now, I don't know if, like, using a torch in this area, it's probably dangerous because you have rubber, you have oil, you're gonna make a fire. Just angle grinder, nice and neat. And you can see it actually, there's a gap now, and I'm starting to hammer the axle out that way. It's starting to come. Great news. So that should work perfectly. So let's finish hammering it out and install the new engine mount and axle assembly. Now, I'm thinking is you could reuse this mount. It's not like it's bad. You can just weld this crack up and the bearing would still be held in place just fine. Just clean the rust up and put the little pinch bolt in. Wild animals. So let's finish this up. All right, here we go. You want to position your air hammer so it doesn't like keep flopping around. Bingo. Alright, now let's remove the engine mount itself. So for that, safety first, I always keep the main jack under the center point, and then 2 jack stands, one on each frame rail. And now, since we're removing the center mount, it's the main load carrying mount for the engine on the back side. So you want to take another jack with a just a board and take the weight off of the engine mount. And you'll see it kind of relax. Okay? And before you do that, I removed most of the fasteners. So there are 4 nuts down here, 14 millimeter, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts that attach the mount to the engine block. I left one in place. It's loose right now. It's the last one we're going to take out. Also, this 17 millimeter bolt going through the mount, I loosened that up just so we have some wiggle room because it's going to be kind of tight coming out. So let's take the last bolt out right now. All right. And that thing is probably stuck on the engine block because there are 2 locating dowels right there and right there on the new mount. You can see where they are. See 1 and 2. So we might need a little persuasion from the air hammer to loosen that up, and then you know, that piece should be loose already. We can even jack up the engine a little bit more. You can see the mount is lifting up out of its home there. Okay. You want to give yourself as much room as possible. Now let's try to knock this mount away from the engine block. Shouldn't be too So at this point, we can just remove this bolt right here to kind of loosen everything up. So this bracket can either stay here or come out or whatever it wants to do. And now the engine mount itself, just want to get it off that dowel. There we go. So now both pieces are loose. Now we just have to play a little Tetris, figure out how it wants to come out. Okay, not too bad. Here's the main piece. A little rubber ring. And the bracket, well, I can just stay here while we install the new mount. Clean everything up, lube it up. Should be pretty easy. You can see the beautiful new mount, and this is the old squished one. It's completely shot, but the engine was still, running pretty smoothly. It's a V6 Toyota. Don't feel the vibrations. We need to transfer this little heat shield over. I'll do that right now while it's out here in the open, and then just lube it up, slide it back together. Alright, so we got these two bolts screwed in, so this mount's in place, and we can, while this is loose, start this one. Start threading that in, and then we'll lower the engine mount. It'll kind of sit on the frame rail, put all the nuts back together, and I'll turn the camera back on when we install the new bearing. We'll coat this up with grease so this problem won't reoccur. Because the Chinese axles, they might not last more than a year. So before installing the new axle, we want to coat that bearing holder with plenty of marine grease. This stuff will stay here forever, however long this van lives, or until the Chinese axle needs to come out again. So next time it should be easy to remove the axle without cutting the engine mount. Alright, here we go. So you want to be careful, guide the transmission side into the transmission. Under the car. Make sure it happens smoothly. Now get in, perfect. Alright, so you can see the circlip is in. The little two ears face towards the rear of the vehicle, and you can even put it in by hand. It's not too hard to move around when everything's lubed up and nice. Now we have to install the little pinch bolt from the bottom, and don't forget the little rubber spacer. It's like a little cap that pushes on the bearing, so you don't want the bolt pushing on the bearing. Put that right in here. $14mm. That's it. The axle is in. Just have to put the axle nut on and reassemble the brake. Take this thing for a spin. Alright, let's see how the old girl accelerates. Feel for any shimmies, vibrations. Still got that V6 pull. Butter smooth so far. Once I get it up to 70, we'll make sure there are no more vibrations. Alright, here we go. Yep, it's fixed. So, if you have to replace your Toyota axle, there's some tips and tricks. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.